Welcome back. Well, yes, we'll go for another look at the headlines with Kaide Alayode. Okay, I guess the fingers, they're stuck, and then we can't get to see Kaide, but let's get back to this then. Mr. Gboye Leyimun joins us now. He is a legal practitioner. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Pleasure is mine. Thank you for inviting me. I'm always delighted to be here.
You listened to the chairman of INEC speak on the floor of the Senate about INEC's preparedness for the elections. What were your thoughts afterwards?
Well, first of all, and on a very light note, I think he was relieved that at least he was able to ventilate whatever reservations he may have had. And I say reservations because the postponement of the election, given the pressure that the INEC was put under, was some form of relief for those folks. And, you know, although on a light note, but it's a lot of message in there.
Those of them who had legal questions about legality of the use of the permanent voter cards or the card readers, they did ask their questions, some of them. But do you think that they eventually were satisfied with the answers that the chairman gave?
Well, to be frank with you, trying to put things in perspective, I actually discovered that the INEC chairman was very persuasive. You see, if you see his responses, and let's even put body language aside, what are the issues or reservations that people have had on the other side, those who are against the use of the card readers, for example, or the permanent voter's card? If you look at these things dispassionately and soberly, you will find that Jega is actually well-meaning. What these things, in my humble view, were designed to achieve is to eliminate the abuses of the past, the electoral abuses of the past, and ensure that the errors are minimized, so that, you know, the very complaint that we get all the time about there being electoral fraud will be minimized. That's quite frankly what I feel.
In that case then, do you think it will be a good thing, and how much of a good thing? How do you think that politicians will then say, well, if we have the permanent voter cards, if INEC has been able to get the card readers, if so far they're looking good, well, in order for us to also demonstrate that we also want to contribute a lot to free and fair elections, you know what, Nigeria will do electronic voting. We'll amend the laws and ensure that we vote electronically.
Well, if you, maybe not immediately, but if you looked at what INEC has been trying to do, especially since Jega took over, you know, Jega is a very, in my humble view, again, a very dynamic, well-meaning person. I think that so far as is humanly possible, he's got integrity, and he's a very focused man. There has been improvement over, you know, the procedure and prospects to ensure that the abuses are not as, you know, widespread and obvious as before. And don't forget, these things do take time. Especially, it is a very huge, you know, process. I remember, for example, what I felt when I got my own permanent voter's card, notwithstanding the crisscrossing that I did and a bit of trouble that I was giving. But once I received it, the first thing that crossed my mind is, this is truly a great country. Because the huge organization and arrangement that you require to be able to get it across to the voters.
But the thing is, I mean, yesterday, behind the scenes, there was this argument that integrity and competence, two different things. And then they also argued that, look, after all, if the elections had not been postponed, over 20 million people were not going to participate in that elections. And so what then happens to the argument about integrity and competence?
You see, let me tell you, just like most of the ills of the country are usually laid at the door of the president or the presidency, there's so much that one man and a leader can do. What is the business of a leader? Basically to inspire, basically to get people to follow him and so forth and do the right things. So there are these human factors. And if you look at how elaborate the process of election is, don't forget that the act itself is of about 150 something sections, almost 160 sections, all right, dealing with every conceivable issue along the way in the electoral process.
And possibly missing out some.
And each of those sections themselves are issues on their own. And then when you add the human factor, or the recalcitrant human factor, or the malicious human factor, you find that, you know, it's really a huge logistic problems.
If I may come in here.
Yes.
But it took, between the last election and this election, 4 years. One would think that, okay, there are mistakes in the last election. You would have had time to build. In 4 years, you've had test runs.
Yes.
In between, within those 4 years.
Yes.
And then you still come to this point and we say have these logistic issues.
Well, let me put it this way. This is part of the logistic human factors that I was talking about. That's one. And secondly, don't forget that because of these human factors, Nigeria itself is a very peculiar problem. It's a very peculiar place. You know, people do it for, usually, if you look, negligence, carelessness, indifference, you know, an attitude, sometimes often lackadaisical, and so forth. But look, the point is, you can never get it 100% right. These lapses are permissible in a human society.
Would it have been more acceptable?
Yes.
Just so they can put it all together. Would it have been more acceptable if the INEC chairman and his team had carried Nigerians along in the course of the preparations? I mean, every step of the way, let Nigerians know, this is where we are, these are our challenges.
That's really the catch about the postponement. I would rather have preferred an INEC coming out. After all, there was some postponement in 2011 when there was, he had logistic problems. And it was honest enough. And everyone felt persuaded. Because there's a lot to be said for the integrity of the system itself. People must have confidence in this procedure. Of what use is it? Look, people won't listen to your programs if they didn't have confidence, if they didn't think it was educating, informing, and entertaining. People will lose interest. So Jega came at that time and said, oh, well, look, for this and that and the other reasons, this is not the first time elections have been postponed in the country. But people want to know that, well, how come this postponement was occasioned? If satisfactory reasons, not suspect reasons, have been put forward, people will feel persuaded. And that's the point to always bear in mind.